the dark side is more like a shadow that follows us wherever we go. What it is, it's the unseen motivations, the drives, the passions that are underneath, kind of pushing us to accomplish things in our lives.
Motivations can be difficult to identify. They're a mix of our past, our personality, our dreams. Gary McIntosh is a distinguished professor, researcher, and has been consulting and leadership coaching for nonprofits and churches for over 40 years. ECFA's Michael Martin and Gary discussed one of his books, Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership: How to Become an Effective Leader by Confronting Potential Failures. Stick around.
Trust what you say to be honest and true. Eventually they lose trust, and then you can't lead.
Hello, Gary. Welcome to the ECFA podcast. How are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm doing great. It's good to be with you today. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much. I'll tell you what, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now, and just excited to jump in, and was sharing with you that this is what we call the Behind the Seal podcast, where at ECFA we talk about the ECFA seal. Well, we're going to go behind the seal and just let folks in, and even on some of the things we're working on and things we're thinking about. And, I've shared with you, healthy leadership has been one of those things that we're really thinking more about, and even done some survey work with our members where we're asking about healthy leadership and how that relates to trust and even financial accountability. And Gary, on a survey that we did with almost 800 members that responded, we asked about resources that were helpful. And one of the most popular that just kept coming up was this Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership, which I think is celebrating about 25 years now. You probably can't believe that, but I just wanted to continue to come back to some of the great principles from that resource.
Thank you. I did not realize that it would pop up that high on your members list, but I'm honored that it did. It sounds like it's, met a need out there.
Well, I think so. And I'll say, I know a lot of these issues are things that are sort of been around for a long time. I mean, but just more and more, I think we're seeing this as an important need. And I'd say in some ways your book was a book ahead of its time. But I'm grateful that it has been such a blessing. And, I say just from my perspective, I think probably a couple reasons for that is I didn't get the sense to, and I've read the book cover to cover and just taken away so much, but I think it's one of those things where the approach has not been, hey, we're, just pointing our fingers at what's wrong with leaders, or even kind of bemoaning, the number of failures or things that have happened. But it's really to kind of get to unpacking, let's understand sometimes why this can be the case, what can contribute, and also what can we put in place in order to help encourage healthy leadership.
Well, I'm glad you picked up that feeling from the book, because we weren't trying to point fingers or anything, but my co-author and I had noticed, as everybody has, that in every field of endeavor, there seems to be a lack of integrity that is popping up more and more. I'm not sure that it's, as you mentioned, these are old issues, and we know they go back, in time. And we actually use a lot of illustrations of people from years ago, particularly from the Bible. But, these are old issues. It's not new today. I think what's new today is the visibility because of the internet. Years ago, if, say, a pastor in Florida had embezzled some money, I, living in California, would have never heard about it. Today, if that pastor embezzles some money, it's on the internet, and I hear it, tonight when I look at Facebook or something. I'm just really not sure that it's as epidemic of a problem as we think it is. Maybe it's just that it's more visible, but there hasn't been a lot of research on that. I don't know how you would study that. to find out, but I think that's part of the issue. We're more aware, and maybe it's good that we are more aware, because then we can be more sensitive to it.
Well, I'm glad you said that. I was just thinking the same thing. I know that there's the shadow or the negative side that can come from like news overload and things like that. But I think the awareness is huge, and it's something that is leaders too that are coming from a biblical worldview and a standpoint, caring about these things, and that mandate of giving the world the right impression of God, as we often say here at ECFA. So I think that awareness is really not all bad. So yeah, I just think even too, jumping in. So the title is Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership, or you've talked a lot about the dark side of leadership. So maybe we even start there and kind of saying, okay, how do we define that? What exactly does that mean? It sounds a little ominous, but can you tell us what you mean by that?
It does, and particularly because of the old Star Wars movies,
I hadn't thought about that.
come over to the dark side,
Yeah.
we weren't, we weren't thinking of the dark side as being necessarily a negative thing. Well, it can be, but it can also be positive, which we can talk about in a minute. I like the way the Korean translation does it. This book has been translated into multiple languages, and in the Korean translation, they actually call it the shadow side.
Yes.
And I like that concept a little bit better. It's like when we're outside, the sun's hitting our body. If we turn around and look on the opposite side, we see our shadow on the sidewalk. And that's a concept I would say to your listeners. The dark side is more like a shadow that follows us wherever we go. And what it is, it's the unseen motivations, the drives, the passions that are underneath kind of pushing us to accomplish things in our lives. So to give a classic example, would be a person who maybe had an absentee father in their life. And as they grow up, they become a workaholic. Well, why are they a workaholic? Why are they driven to spend extra hours at work and neglect their family and cancel vacations and not go on vacation? What is the unseen motivation, passion, or drive that's causing them to do that? Well, in the case I just suggested, it might be that the dark side or the shadow side is that they're trying to prove their worth to a father who was never there. So emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, there's this shadow, this dark side that's forcing them to work extra hard to the point that it hurts their family, their physical life. But the shadow side is that they're trying to prove their worth to this father who was not there. But they don't see that. It's not something that they think about, talk about, and unless they really, kind of investigate their own life, why am I so driven to work so hard, But a lot of people don't even ask that question. They just work hard, And
that's right. Yeah.
the good thing, and that's an example too of how it can be good and bad, because the good thing is that it drives them to be a hard worker, which is not bad to be a hard worker. It probably leads to success. But on the other hand, it's got the dark side in that it causes them to maybe injure their family because they're not there for their family. They should be. So I hope that'll help the listeners, get a better perspective of what we mean by dark side.
Yeah, that's good. No, and I think that will help really set the stage for a lot of other great principles that we'll keep unpacking here. Yeah, I like how you describe that as the unseen motivation and drive, and really whether we realize it or not, like you said, so much of life we're kind of on autopilot, and we're just going and doing and living the next day and doing the next thing, and so many times we don't realize what's unseen, below the surface, motivating us, driving us. And I also like how you said it's really just part of being human. Like, this is part of the human experience, isn't it?
It is, yeah, because we all have experiences that are kind of hidden in our life that kind of end up being motivators for the future, and we often just don't think about it. Like you say, we're just living life and not thinking about it. And but there's things there motivating us, whenever it is, you know.
That's right. That's right. And coming back to applying these principles, I guess, in the context of leadership, Gary, why is it important too that as leaders we really understand this whole idea of there's a dark side or there's a shadow side, and some of these motivations that are unseen that are driving us? Why is it important in leadership in particular that we understand that?
It's important because if we're not aware of them, there's nothing that we can do to mitigate the negative aspects of it. And I think if we can be aware of what our motivations are, and honestly, I don't know that we can ever know completely what our motivations
Yes.
are. The Lord knows the heart and knows our motivations, which is a scary thought sometimes, because I wonder sometimes, even in my own life, why am I doing this? Am I doing it for the right motive or the wrong motive? Well, I can investigate that to a point, but, deep down in the recesses of my heart and soul, only God really knows. But I think the more we can know ourselves and be aware of what is driving us in our life, to be a good parent, to be a success in life, to serve in ministry, to be the CEO of a company, whatever. I think we can, to some extent, redeem the negative portions of that, and so that we don't cause harm to ourselves, to our family, to other people. I think so that we can be a healthier person, a better, well-rounded person, not driven by things that we're not aware of. It's just a healthier lifestyle, if we can know and be aware of what's driving us.
I think that's right. Yeah. And it really begins with, like you said, we're none of us are ever going to arrive, right? But it at least starts with awareness, and then let's kind of go on this journey, right? And I like too how you said that when leaders refuse to take the inward journey to explore and to resolve their dark side issues, you do point out that the result will often be some form of a leadership failure. And we'll get a little bit, I'd love to explore more with you too about how the particulars of like a ministry environment, but let's even zoom out a little bit, because I think one thing that was helpful, I hadn't given a whole lot of thought of about this too, but we think about just leaders in all contexts, in business or government. Let's not pick on the ministry leaders for a moment. Let's kind of zoom out a little bit and say this is a phenomenon that's true just about human nature in general, right? So can you give us some of those examples that you've seen in your experience? Because I think that'll help us too in our understanding. It's not just a ministry issue.
Mm-hmm. Sure, that's right. Yeah. Well, before before I went into ministry, I worked in corporate America for 3 years, and I remember having a district manager who came in one day, and he pulled I think there were 29 of us who were managing stores in the district, and he pulled us all in, and after welcoming us, the very first thing he said was, I'm here to make money, and if I have to step on you to make money, I'm going to do it.
Wow.
And that's a quote, man. That's a quote.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was too young to investigate his motive. But now I look back on that, and I think, what was causing him to approach us in a corporation like that? I mean, it would have been much better if he would have come in and cast a vision for customer service and supporting each other and a collegial work environment. And of course, we hear a lot about that today. But
Yeah.
this is going back now to the 1970s. And in the 1970s, man, it was dog eat dog.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
I
yeah.
just
And you point out even today too, right? With, political leaders and so on, like, those that reach certain levels of, I guess, what we would deem success, right? There's oftentimes it is that drive or there's that something that's kind of behind it.
That's right. That's right. And the drive, it shows itself in treating people poorly, which is what I experienced in that corporate environment, which is one reason I left the corporate environment. Actually, the Lord called me to ministry, but I, that was part of the overall picture. But treating people poorly, sometimes you'll have people in corporate leadership who will outright lie to shareholders, to customers, to employees, And what happens is eventually they get caught. Eventually the lie shows up. And then that undermines trust because you mentioned it earlier in your introduction. Leadership is all about trust. I've taught leadership for years, and I think that is a bottom line. Leadership's about trust. And if the people who are under you can't trust you to treat them fairly, to treat them well, kindly, respectfully, if they can't trust what you say to be honest and true, eventually they lose trust, and then you can't lead. Because if you stand up and say something to your employees or to your shareholders and they can't trust it, they don't know if you're telling the truth now or if you're telling a lie like you did before. And that's something I've seen happen both in ministry, believe it or not, and in corporate America, where the CEO or CFO or somebody outright lies. And maybe they get away with it for a while, but eventually they get caught. And that undermines trust. And then they can no longer be a leader because people never know if what you're saying is true this time or not true this time,
Yeah.
It shows up. Now, why would a person lie? See, that's where we get in our book, is to what are the deeper dark side issues. Well, maybe the person, even though they're highly successful, maybe they are deep inside, maybe they're insecure. And they feel like that they've got to show themselves perfect or always having the answer or something. They're so insecure they can't say, well, I don't know. Well, they make up something to appear, to help themselves in their own mind at least appear like they have more wisdom or more insight or more knowledge or something than they do. And what they're really doing is they're propping up their own insecurity, and that's why they lie. So then in the book, what we would say is, okay, let's just try and go back a few years and let's figure out, why are you so insecure? You're the CEO of the company. You proved yourself to be a success, but you're so insecure that you can't divulge to other people that sometimes you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And I'd love to come back to some of those, like you say, kind of the steps that somebody should walk through. But Gary, yeah, you mentioned insecurity. That was very helpful. What are some of the other broad categories that you all identified? Because I think that's helpful too. It's not a one size fits all, but there are some kind of common tendencies that we do see as it relates to the dark side. So what else in addition to insecurity?
Well, in the book, we actually outline 5 different typical types of people. And, we've been talking a little bit today about, we talk about the compulsive leader. And a compulsive leader is a person who is highly driven. They are really concerned about their status and how they appear to other people. They're really seeking approval from other people. And so this is the person that typically becomes a workaholic type of person. And that shows up in any kind of a business environment or church environment, with a leader. We've mentioned that a lot. One that you'll read a lot about today, people are concerned with, is what's called the narcissistic leader. And
Tell us about that. Yeah.
a narcissistic leader who is a person who needs to have a claim. They need to be admired. They have to always have a sense of approval. They typically have to be up front in every organization, every meeting. Someone jokingly said the narcissistic leader, is the bride at every wedding and the corpse in every funeral. Yeah. And there's a lot of concern, and today you'll see a lot of writing about the concern of narcissistic leaders being megachurch pastors sometimes. I'm personally not one who believes that every pastor of a megachurch is narcissistic, but there are some people that are highly critical of that. And, there may be some, but anybody who gets into leadership of big organizations, they have to have some desire to be up front.
Right. I was going to ask you why you think too that we are seeing that rise. Is it just kind of a rise in interest, or what do you make of that? Just that conversation around narcissism and leadership.
I think just observers of the situation are noticing that some leaders appear to just want the acclaim, just want the admiration up front. There's nothing necessarily wrong about being up front and wanting to be honored for what you do. In fact, the Bible says to give honor to whom honor is due. But it's when it becomes, I guess you would say, the driving force of your life, why would a person always have to have that acclaim and desire that? Again, it might be insecurities of some sort. There could be multiple reasons for that. But usually as we point out in the book, the major issue of the narcissistic leader is the feelings typically of inferiority. That they feel that they've just got to have that acclaim. Whereas with the compulsive leader, the basic driving forces are usually some sort of anger or rebellious feelings from the past. And we don't have time today to unpack all these, but you're your listeners can read the book. I wish they would too. Thank you for them. Thank you to those who do. But sometimes there's an anger that a person has deeply rooted in their life from the past, and that causes them to be very compulsive in their life.
Yeah, and Gary too. I was gonna say, yeah, I appreciate, kind of some of that overview, and like you say, there are other categories, that we should be mindful of. And the word that come to mind too, as I was just listening, reflecting on some of what you're saying, is it really takes a lot of humility. It takes a lot of humility as a leader, as a person, to just acknowledge that we're all broken. We all have these experiences, perhaps shadow sides. And so takes a level of humility for a leader to look inward. And so what are, in the spirit of redeeming, because God is a redeemer, and like you say, some of these things can be used for good. There's danger when we don't take that time to go through a transformational process with the Lord. But for those leaders who are humble enough and are wanting to take that inward look, what are just some of the steps that they should take as they're maybe mindful of this issue of, okay, maybe there are some shadows that I need to be aware of and that I need to deal with?
In the book, we kind of outline some basic steps. As you know, and your listeners know, even though we put things in step 1, step 2, step 3, it never happens that way.
It's not that easy, is it?
No. But I think when when we're trying to put things on paper and give people help, it's helpful to kind of outline it that way. I think the first step really is to acknowledge it, to acknowledge that I've got some hidden issues that are there, and I admit it to myself. And as you say, that takes a lot of humility to do that. But if we can humble ourselves and admit that we've got something deep within us that's causing us to have this dark side issues, that's the first step. It's always the first step.
Just acknowledgement. Yeah.
Acknowledge and admit it. Now, I think the second step is to take a deep dive into our past and try and identify what it is that is the aspects of our life that are causing us to feel and act, respond the way that we do. Most of the issues that we have in our lives typically go back to our family of origin. So we're talking about usually our childhood years, our teen years, usually things in that era of our lives is what typically is driving us in the future. And so sometimes that means that we need some assistance. We need a mentor, a spiritual coach, a counselor, somebody to help us kind of unpack that. Sometimes we can do it ourselves, but a lot of times we need someone else who we can talk to. They can listen. They can help us see things in our lives that we really can't see ourselves.
And again, that's a posture of humility and strength.
Well, it really is. we could talk about that because I could give you illustrations from my own life, but yeah, I think humility is a big issue because a lot of times leaders don't have the humility to get help. They don't, because particularly if they have strong issues related to their dark side, to admit that they're wrong or to admit that they need help says, well, I'm not perfect. And that is hard for a leader to do. sometimes.
It sure
Yeah,
is. And maybe that's actually kind of a good point here too on the side is for those who are in a community that are surrounding the leader.
yeah,
Because sometimes it is difficult for, us to see things in ourselves, or the dark side, if you will, is so strong that we do need those other influences, those other people in our lives, whether it be a spouse or a close friend or someone that you work with or in church community with. And so how do those of us who are surrounding a leader kind of help them maybe take that first step, or to see that there's bring some awareness to even some of these issues?
I found over the years the best thing to do is to ask questions. Um, it's difficult to tell a person what to do. If you're a
Yes.
spouse or a member of a board, and let's say you're a member of a board and you go into the CEO or the senior pastor and say, you've got problems. Well, the minute you use the you word,
Right.
react. And it's better to, for a spouse to say, uh, well, honey, I noticed you were getting angry in the hallway with the person. What do you think caused you to be so angry? Asking a question. I noticed. What caused you to be so angry? Or a member of a board perhaps could go into a senior pastor or maybe a CEO of a company and say, well, Bob, uh, I was observing you today in your interaction with the secretary, and it seemed like you were really upset. What was causing you to be upset? And the CEO might say, what are you talking about? I wasn't upset. you know,
But asking questions, you're going to get further.
Questions, right? Asking questions, I think, is really the way to go, and not being afraid to ask questions. Now, sometimes in a board situations, it's wise not to. It's wise maybe to schedule a coffee time or something, and talk to them in private, and just say, "Well, Bob, I noticed. I've noticed over the last 6 months that you always seem to get angry when you're working, with this person. You know, Pack that for me. What's going on here?" And, you try and begin by asking questions, get the person to begin to think a little deeper as to why they are acting the way they're acting. I think that's a way to go. Um, Sometimes it could be maybe if it's really activity that is endangering the organization, the church. I think maybe 2 or 3 really trusted, respected people by the leader can maybe get together with them privately and bring up some of these issues. And again, I think it's best to say, "Hey, we've noticed what's going on."
That's good.
But
That's good.
as we've observed over the last few years, and I know you're aware of this, that in large organizations, it's really difficult for the board to challenge
Yes.
or the pastor. it's it, we think the board will discipline the leader, but they don't. Uh,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I would say too, yeah, along those lines, just encouraging board members to see, we use a word a lot around here about stewardship, but being in that position comes with great responsibility, a great stewardship. And like you say, at times it requires boldness, but in humility.
yeah,
Um,
yes.
Truth and love. Well, yeah, take us back to, so again, if we've acknowledged and kind of examined the past, and maybe taking some of those next steps to perhaps reach out and get the other help or the assistance that we need. Anything else kind of in that line of how do we redeem some of this dark side in leadership?
Sure. Well, in general, as Christians, we would certainly go to prayer, and we would acknowledge in prayer the issues that are in our heart and driving us. We would ask the Lord to give us even more awareness, and through the Holy Spirit to empower us to, um, to take the necessary steps to correct or change our approaches, attitudes, to be more honest, to be open, to be willing to admit when we don't know, and, a host of other things. Certainly that's where it would start, I think, as the Holy Spirit works within ourselves to redeem us. Then
Yes.
from a human standpoint, I think what we do is we set boundaries. If we know that there's certain activities in our life that are not healthy, then we set boundaries. For instance, I know one pastor friend. He's passed away now, but um, uh, he was the pastor of a huge church here in California. Started a movement of some 500 other churches. Uh,
Ah,
and he almost got a divorce because he was such a workaholic. He was neglecting his wife, and she confronted him somehow or other about it. And again, he was humble enough to see it and to
yeah.
adjust his schedule. So what he did, believe it or not, is as a pastor, he declared there would be no more meetings after 5 o'clock in the evening. And
Good.
which is
Yeah.
crazy. If anybody knows pastors always have meetings in the evening. I mean, there's board meetings, there's counseling sessions, on and on and on.
Sure. Sure.
If you wanted to meet with this pastor, 6 a.m., man, 6 a.m.
Yeah. Start early. Start early.
Now, what that did is it freed up all of his evenings. He was home all evenings, not just
Ah,
2 evenings a week, every night of the week. And it also cut down on his meetings because people would come to him and say, Pastor, can I meet with you on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock? He would say, I don't do meetings in the evenings, but I can meet with you Thursday morning at 5 a.m. And to say, no, I don't need to meet with you that bad.
I love that you shared that though, because sometimes it does. It just comes down to the really practical things. So I think that's really good. And another really practical one too that I know you've shared with other leaders is and coming back to that idea of the relationship between the leader and the board, and it's one that has to be just navigated with a lot of wisdom. But boards, we say around here, I mean, have such an opportunity, a unique opportunity for influence in the leader's life, and in a way that is really almost unlike anyone else that the leader will interact with. But you talk about even an annual performance review and some of those rhythms, and tell us how even those kinds of conversations, or what we might think is kind of okay, we got to do this, get this done every year. It can be much more than just a procedural, check the box. We need to get this done by the end of the year. But even, Gary, those are opportunities to surface some of these kinds of issues, aren't they?
Well, it is. And what I found, particularly in pastoral ministry in churches, is an annual performance review is probably the most difficult thing for the board to do in many ways. If you're evaluating a CEO, say of a for-profit company, you can evaluate them. You can do a 360 evaluation. You can definitely look at profit and loss and acquisitions and divestitures and all that. And as you know, it in a corporate world, it's a little bit easier to evaluate. When you come to a church, boards, I found they find it very difficult. How do you evaluate the performance of a pastor when you're not evaluating that on nickels and nickels, noses, things like that? It's a tough one. It really is. I do think that there are available, some instruments to help with that. But beyond that, most of the instruments that I've seen don't get into dark side issues. They don't get into.
Yeah.
I think what's good sometimes is to perhaps let the pastor pick 2 or 3 board members that they really trust. You might have a board of, say, 8 or 10 people.
Right.
A pastor's not going to have an equal trusting relationship with every single one of them. We might wish that was so. It's not so.
Right.
But usually there'll be 2 or 3 really trusted people. And I think that those people and the pastor need to get away and sit down and have a conversation. This is what we've seen in this year in your life. To us, it seems like you're working too much, or to us, sometimes it seems like you're embellishing the truth when you preach, and to have an honest conversation, what is driving you, that sort of thing. I think it also helps in a pastoral situation to have a conversation with the spouse. And what's really happening at home. Now, and most churches don't do this. They just don't do it. So they'll look at budget, they'll look at the increase in attendance, the pastoral report. Well, I preached 40 times this year. I did this, and I did this, and I did this, but no one really ever has a serious conversation about life and ministry, the prayer life. Pastor, how's your prayer life going? Are you praying? Are you neglecting prayer? Do you have any relationships outside the church? Do you have any hobbies? And as far as I know, in the boards I've interacted with over the years, no one ever has these conversations. When I was, honestly, I was a pastor for 9 years, and nobody ever asked me, are you spending enough time with your wife? How's your prayer life, Pastor? Are you able to, get some relaxing time away from the church? No one ever asked me that.
Yeah. Well, I hope that, as a result of even, just some of these conversations and I'm encouraged in some ways by even the responses, like I mentioned, to some of our ECFA member surveys. There are, even the boards and the organizations that aren't doing these things, Gary, we're seeing more interest in it, and how do we do it? And maybe, like you said, it's because of some of the awareness pieces and so on. But I was going to also tag on to what you were sharing. And I think a key question too, from a board standpoint, as they're having that conversation with the leader, is to also just ask some of those open-ended questions as well about what kind of support do you need? Because, and again, coming back to some of the survey work that we've done, the leaders that have responded to that have said, hey, you know what? It is awkward. It is awkward to bring up and say, boy, I really feel like I need a sabbatical, or I could use counseling in my life, or whatever it is. It can be hard for a leader to come to the board and feel like they're being vulnerable and ask for that level of help. But if you are one of those 2 to 3, like you say, trusted board members, if you are to ask a leader and to invite that, I just think that there could be some real meaningful feedback that could come from the leader as a result of that.
Sure, absolutely. And I think if the leader is wise, they'll have an outside coach or an outside mentor outside the organization. We hear a lot more about that today. In every field in our world, a person has a coach.
Right.
Tiger Woods had a coach, the best of the best.
Multiple coaches, probably.
Best of the best have a coach, or someone outside of them that they can talk to and share with, and people who can be honest with them. So sometimes it's not always within the board. But what the board could do is the board could say to the leader of the organization, we want you to have an outside mentor. We want you to have a
yes.
We're going to meet again for another board meeting in 3 months. So in 3 months, we want you to come back and tell us, who is your coach, and are you meeting with them weekly or monthly? What are you doing? or in a pastoral situation, you could maybe move it even beyond a coach to, we want you to have some sort of a mentor, someone who's a little bit older than you, more experienced than you, been down the road further than you. Who are you meeting with? And how
Yeah.
often are you meeting with them? And, kind of gently force, I guess, the pastor to get somebody, a meaningful coach, outside of their life. Because a lot of times, particularly in pastoral ministry, where there's high expectations on a pastor to be holy and to be perfect, even though we know they're not perfect. But there's external expectations the congregation has and the board has, and then of course the pastor's got their own internal expectations too, which are sometimes
Yeah.
issue. But if they can't sometimes feel that they can be completely honest with their board. Well, that's probably the wrong term. They can be honest, but they can't be completely open
Good.
about
Yeah.
feelings and their thoughts and things. But they need somebody, and the board could encourage that. The board could pay for that, because sometimes to get a coach, you need to pay that coach to be there.
Good point.
Right. The board could, pay for that. The board could pay for the sabbatical. And that's probably one of the good things that's happened over the last, I'd say, 10, 15 years of church ministry, is that there is more and more pastors now who are getting a sabbatical, paid leave after maybe 6 years or so, 2 or 3 months, to get away, to rest, to sleep, to evaluate. And I think if a board really wants their pastor to stay a long time, then they probably need to build in some sort of a sabbatical leave policy into the whole, church system. So the person gets a rest. A lot of times when pastors leave churches and go to another church, frankly, they just need rest.
That's right.
If they could have a sabbatical, they would probably stay in their church.
Wow.
But a lot of pastors know the only way to get a break is to change churches. Then they get a month or 2 or 3 months between churches.
Yeah. Well, Gary, if you had to use just one word to describe, I know this might be tough, but if you if you just had one word to describe the impact that healthy leadership, integrity in leadership, that could have on a ministry organization, what would that one word be?
Trust.
Trust.
Yeah.
You said that earlier. Leadership is trust. Yeah.
I've thought a lot about this, and I think that leadership really is all about trust. And to have a healthy organization, no matter what the organization, there has to be trust within the organization. And that goes both ways. It's trust upward to the CEO, the lead pastor, whoever it is, trust of the board. Are they doing what they should do? Are they honest and in their dealings and what they say? But it goes downward too. Do the employees, do they show up on time? Do they do their job well? Do they give an honest day's work for their pay? Can the leadership trust the people? Can the people trust the leadership? If you don't have that, it's just really difficult in any organization to see growth and development in a healthy way. And
That's right.
if it's unhealthy, it can go on for a long time. But eventually there will be a collapse somewhere in the organization at some level in the organization. And then when it collapses, then a lot of people are hurt, damaged. We've seen plenty of examples of that, particularly in some churches over the years, but also in some major organizations too. I think about Enron and some other organizations where people were lying and cheating, and eventually it collapses, and then lots of people are damaged. Of course, in the business world, people are damaged financially and things of that nature. In the church world, people can be driven away from the Lord, and ultimately that's more dangerous.
That's right. Well, you've just shared so much with wisdom with us today, and given us a lot to think about. And I do just encourage all those who are listening, Gary, to check out Overcoming the Dark Side of Leadership. It's a fantastic resource. And what are some other ways that folks can be following you, just staying in touch with your continued work as well?
Sure. Well, they can go to my website, which is churchgrowthnetwork.com. And I have a weekly blog that's on there. And I have postings on Facebook and Instagram each week. But if they go to my website or go to the books, all my contact information is in there in the back. And I'd be happy to talk with people by phone, email, whatever, if they've got questions. I also am willing to come out and consult with a church or a board and meet with them. And I do a lot of work in the area of staffing and board relationships and staff relationships, things of that nature. So look me up on churchgrowthnetwork.com and contact me if I can be of help.
All right. Well, Gary, we will do that. And you are a blessing to our community, but you've been a blessing especially to ECFA today. So thank you so much again for all your insights.
Michael, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor to be with you. I appreciate all the good work that you folks are doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Behind the Seal podcast from ECFA. What hope we can glean from reflecting on our shadow side, on the unseen motivations, is that Christ's work in us can redeem everything. The upside down kingdom, servants are leaders, weaknesses become strengths. We always appreciate a review wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with a friend. And make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss an episode. Take care and God bless.